Welcome to 2819. This is a show where we aim to inspire you to go and make disciples of all nations. I'm Sandra Dimes.
And I'm Krista Bontrager, and this is the television outreach of Reasons to Believe, a viewer-supported ministry where science and faith converge.
Yes, and we really want to just encourage you to step out and be bold. Share your faith with someone with confidence and compassion.
And as you're watching this show today, be sure to get connected with us on social media.
Yes, we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at 2819 Show. We'd love to hear from you.
We're going to kick things off here with just a quick rundown of what we're going to do on today's show.
In our give and take, our scholar team will discuss the question, is the Big Bang an excuse for scientists to avoid God?
I know many Christians see the Big Bang as an idea that's kind of in opposition to Genesis 1:1. So I'm going to be very interested to hear what our scholars have to say about that.
Yeah, totally. And I hear Monica is going to be talking about a new DVD. Actually, it's your DVD, Ambassadors of the Gospel.
That's right. It's coming out. It's out. When we want to get people to
check it out.
Get connected. And in our Pick of the Week segment, Hugh has a special message just for students. So if you're a student or you know a student who loves Jesus and loves science, this is a message just for you.
And I hear, Krista, for our RTB 101 segment, you're going to be talking to Fuzz about how Christians can represent Christ while on social media. Yeah, that might be a good idea.
There might be a few unbelievers in your feed that are eavesdropping. Yeah. And in today's Culture Talk, Sandra will be talking with our local visiting scholar, Mark Perez. I love this topic of social media thoughts and prayers. What is that about? Is that a good thing, not good thing?
It's become a trope, and so I'm excited to talk to Mark about how we can use that phrase in a way that is actually helpful and doesn't seem trite. So let's first, though, take a look at what our senior research scholar, Jeff Zwerink, is up to with our Give and Take.
Hello, and welcome again to Give and Take. Jeff Zwerink here, and I'm joined by two of my colleagues, Hugh Ross and Ken Samples. Today, we're going to address the question, was the Big Bang just invented to give scientists a way to avoid God? Ken, Hugh, good to have you here in the studio again today.
Hello, Jeff.
So, just to kind of give a little bit of context, when you look at Big Bang models, seems to have there are four fundamental attributes. That there's an idea of the laws of physics are constant. There is an idea of pervasive decay in the universe, the idea that the universe is expanding, and the universe has a beginning. So what I'd kind of like to do is just kind of look through each of those four things, look at them from what does the science have to say, what does the Bible have to say. So Hugh, let's throw it your way. Let's look at the constant laws of physics. What does physics have to say about that?
Well, it does say that they're constant to about 16 places of decimal as far back as 12 billion light years, which is the past 12 billion years.
That seems pretty constant. So if somebody were to look and say, what evidence do we have? I mean, what's kind of the big ideas out there of how that would be illustrated in our physics?
Well, we look at the spectra of distant stars and galaxies, and that tells us what the laws of physics were when the light left those objects.
So we can measure things like the speed of light, the fine structure, what holds atoms
constant,
together, those sorts of things. So, it seems to me that general relativity plays into there too. Where does that play?
Well, general relativity is what predicted that we live in an expanding universe, that the universe has a beginning. And so that was the first clue scientists had that the Bible got it right when it talked about a beginning and when it talked about the universe expanding from a beginning.
All right, so we'll come to that in a second. That's good. Ken, is the idea of what does the Bible have to say about the laws of physics, or does it have anything to say?
Well, I think it puts it in terms of God has created the world. It flows from His logic and His laws. Therefore, the universe is a place that is livable and viable because God's character has built in a place that people can enjoy. And so I think clearly the Bible assumes that the laws of nature are trustworthy and reliable and come from the Lord.
So is this like passages like Jeremiah 33:25 where if in essence God's saying through Jeremiah, look out at the way the heavens behave and it's reliable so you can trust me. It's both of those are kind of rooted in God's character then, if you will.
Yeah, and I think often looking at nature leads us to have greater confidence in the Lord, put our trust in the Lord because of His power and His care for us.
So Hugh, you alluded to this idea that general relativity says that the universe ought to be expanding. I think it's actually that, initially relativity said that the universe is either expanding or contracting. Right. What evidence do we have that the universe is expanding?
Well, all we need to do is look at Hubble Space Telescope images of distant galaxies. The farther away those images are, the closer together the galaxies are. We can actually see the galaxies spreading apart as we go from the distant universe up to the present time.
So is that historically how we've known about the expansion of the universe?
No, I mean, that's just a nice visual way for lay people to see it. There are much stronger evidences that we possess that we live in an expanding universe, based, for example, on the redshift and the fact that we've got accurate distances that can calibrate the redshift that tells us that the universe indeed has been continuously expanding from the cosmic creation event.
So I'm going to dig into that for just a second because I think that's important. What is it about the redshift and the distance? What is the signature there that we're in an expanding universe?
Well, what you notice is that the farther away you look at galaxies, the redder the spectral.
And redder means what?
Redder means that these galaxies are it's called the Doppler shift.
Right.
And so, for example, when a train goes by, you can hear it being a high pitch as it comes towards you, a low pitch as it runs away. Light behaves the same way, and we actually see that in the galaxies.
So I guess my question is, what does redder mean? What does that tell you about what the galaxy is doing?
When galaxies are moving away from us, we notice that the wavelengths are stretched out. If they were moving towards us, they'd be compressed. The stretching out is the reddening, and that's what we observe. The farther the galaxy is, the more towards the red end of the spectrum that we see the shift.
So the further away a galaxy is, the faster it's moving away.
The faster it's moving away, which tells us we live in a continuously expanding universe.
So Ken, biblically speaking, what does the Bible have to say about the dynamics of the universe, if you will?
Well, what's interesting, and I think it's really kind of a fascinating point, that the Bible uses the word stretching out of the heavens. Now, of course, there are Hebrew scholars who think, well, that's kind of metaphorical language there. It is intended to be kind of a scientific reference. On the other hand, there are Hebrew scholars who say, no, that really is a reference to the way the universe is being stretched out by God. Whatever position you hold, that's a point that's going to make you think.
Mm-hmm. Like God alone stretches out the heavens, Job 9:8. And it's 11 passages, not just one or two.
Right.
So we've got a universe governed by constant laws, a universe that's expanding. This idea of a decaying universe, or in science it'd be the entropy. Kind of give us a brief description of this decay that's going on in the universe.
Well, everywhere we look, we see decay. Hey, just look at one another, guys. Everything's decaying. Stars, the galaxies, everywhere we look, we see not only decay, but a very high rate of decay. As it says in Romans 8, the entire universe is subject to this pervasive law of decay.
So, Ken, do you have anything to add to the biblical sense on that?
I think clearly the Bible talks about death. The Bible talks about decay. Scripture seems to follow well along the lines that, the universe is breaking down. And so not all holy books would necessarily agree with that, but Scripture seems to be clearly communicating that point.
So we're kind of 3 for 3 here. Let's go to the fourth there, the beginning. What scientific evidence is there that the universe began to exist?
Well, we got the theoretical evidence from general relativity. We also have the observational evidence.
Hold on, before you move on there, what's the theoretical evidence from general relativity?
Well, something called the space-time theorems.
Okay.
That if you assume that the universe contains mass, and I think we're all evidence for that, right, guys? That the equations of general relativity reliably describe the movements of bodies in the universe.
That we're pretty confident of.
We're very confident, 15 places of decimal confident, that if those two assumptions are true, then there really is a beginning to space and time. Space and time are created. And our observations seem to sustain that because, again, the farther away we look, we see that the universe seems to be emerging from an infinitesimal volume. We see it in the temperature. We can measure the past temperatures of the universe, and we see that it's cooling is exactly what we'd expect from a cosmic creation event.
So there's observational and theoretical support for this idea of a beginning. Ken, biblically, where does that play out?
I think it's a critical scriptural teaching, both Jewish and Christian, In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Most biblical scholars would say heavens and the earth is a reference to the totality of all things. There are other worldviews and religions that don't believe in a beginning. In Buddhism, the universe neither began nor will it end. So the idea of a universe that comes into existence, has what we might call a singular beginning, is uniquely a biblical idea.
So if I'm tracking here, the Bible describes a universe with a beginning, decaying, expanding, constant laws of physics. That matches the scientific record. So have scientists just embraced Christianity?
Well, Jeff, I wasn't raised in a Christian home. It was seeing Big Bang cosmology in the Bible that was my first clue. This book actually could be the inspired inerrant word from the one that actually created everything. And when I was growing up, Big Bang cosmology was very much in doubt by astronomers. But eventually the observational evidence became so compelling that they had to accept it in spite of its theological implications and it's sustaining what the Bible has preached for thousands of years.
That to me was a fascinating point. I actually remember looking into that in depth when I heard you speak almost 30 years ago now, that this idea that Big Bang cosmology aligns with what the Bible has to say. And as I investigated, I realized just how much scientists almost didn't want it to be true.
Right,
We've kind of been kicking and screaming almost, dragged to that conclusion. And what I find remarkable about that conclusion is that you look at the universe at the start of the 1900s, and it looked very different. Scientists thought it had existed forever, that it was static and unchanging, and even the laws of physics had some dynamic nature to it. And so major discoveries throughout the 20th century have actually shown that we live in a Big Bang universe, and that Big Bang universe matches the biblical description of the universe. And that is a remarkable, powerful thing. If you'd like to read more about that, there's an article called The Most Persuasive Scientific Evidence for God on our website. Go check out that blog and use that to confidently go tell others that the creator of the universe revealed himself in the scriptures.
Sandra, even though I'm not a scientist, I have to say it really helps to know a little bit about Big Bang cosmology when I'm sharing my faith.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So in her pick of the week, Hugh gives a special message to students. So
it's a good word. We're going to just watch the short interview with Hugh Ross that aired on the Truth Matters program, giving some words of wisdom to high school and college students who love Jesus and love science. Let's take a look.
I think it's really important for students is that they be exposed to the different belief systems, both within the church and outside the church. And it's not just simply having someone tell them what the different positions are. Actually bring the people who uphold those positions. Expose the students to the atheists. Get the best atheists on the campus so they actually see what their arguments are. Likewise, all these creation evolution disputes within the church. Bring the theistic evolutionists in, bring the young earth creationists in, bring the day-age creationists in. Let people hear these different positions from people who actually uphold and are promoting those positions. That's the best way to get equipped. And then afterwards, just to talk about it. For you students thinking about your role on the campus, yes, you want to be diligent about your classes and your textbooks and getting good test scores, but see this as an opportunity to really investigate the important issues of life. As a scientist, I know a lot of fellow scientists who get so distracted by how fun science research is, they never take any time to think about the big questions of life. A lot of atheists I know are what I would call default atheists. They're distracted by their science, they're distracted by their studies, and they never think about the fact that one day they're going to die. What is the meaning of life? Is there a God beyond the universe? And take your opportunity on the campus to actually expose these issues, and you want to hear all the different perspectives. Don't just be exposed to the one that you were raised with. Actually look at people who contradict what you believe, and that I think is really going to help you to get in the habit of spending some time, literally every week. To me, that's the principle of the Sabbath. Take some time out of your busy schedule to focus on the most important issues of life.
And if you'd like to watch more episodes from the Truth Matters show, you can just go on YouTube and go to the Ratio Christi channel and look for the playlist called Truth Matters. And now it's time for RTB 101. This is the segment where we talk about practical questions to help equip you to share your faith with your friends and family more effectively. And I'm here today with my colleague and RTB's biochemist, Dr. Rana. Welcome, Fuz.
Thanks, Krista.
I should say welcome back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always enjoy our conversations, and I think that this is going to be a good one today. And one of my favorite verses, I know it's one of Hugh Ross's favorite verses too, is 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 20. It talks about how we Christians are ambassadors of the gospel. We're bringing Jesus wherever we go. So when we're in our workplace, people know that we're Christians, or we go to church, or we name the name of Jesus. They know what we're up to. But what happens when we're on social media? Like, there is so much breakdown on social media and how we communicate. So I want to take a minute to think about how are we representing Christ in our social media feeds. Let's talk about some do's and don'ts, because we might have some unbelievers in our feed, and they're lurking and they're looking.
That's right. Well, I first of all would point out that Facebook and Twitter are great places for Christians to engage non-believers.
Okay.
And the first do that I would have is remember that 1 Peter 3:15 and 16 applies to social media interactions just like it does to face-to-face interactions. We always want to be in a position where we give reasons for the hope that we have, but we want to remember to do it with gentleness and respect. And so one thing that I like to do is when I'm engaging a non-believer, I like to go to actually their Facebook page. I don't want to stalk them and get weird about it, but I want to learn about them.
Okay.
Who are they? What's their family like? Where do they work? What are some of their interests? And I try to make my posts not just about Christianity and evidence for the Christian faith, but I post other things, and I try to find ways to interact with non-believers that reflect shared interests. If something is happening in their life that's worth celebrating, I celebrate with them. If something is difficult in their life, I want to let them know that I'm concerned about them, that I'm praying for them. So I try to treat them like a real person.
Oh, that's really a good tip, because I think that sometimes we have a tendency to just think about what's in our own head, but in our own minds, but we don't often think about, well, how is this going to come across to the other person? And there really is another person on the other end of that Facebook account. So
yeah, that's exactly right. We always want to ask ourselves this question: is my post going to draw somebody closer to the cross, or is it going to push them away? Okay. And I'm not saying that we don't challenge people's beliefs, but what I'm saying is we aren't obnoxious about it.
Okay, that's good. And sometimes there's a tendency to think about, like, with gentleness and respect, it's like telling someone the absolute truth, but with a smile on your face. But you can't do that in social media. So you have to really kind of measure your words of what you're saying.
Yeah, and one of the things that makes me cringe is when Christians lob the evidence bomb over the wall and let it detonate and not really be concerned about what happens on the other side of the wall.
I'm just telling you the absolute truth.
That's
Here it
right.
is. Okay.
And then it bothers me too when you see Christians take kind of a triumphalistic attitude or make derogatory statements about the intellectual capability of people who disagree with them. That's not helping things whatsoever. Instead of throwing bombs over the wall, we want to knock the wall down. We want to engage in dialogue, ask questions, try to understand what their objections are, and then discuss those things with them.
That's some really good advice. Sometimes I find that I learn from my mistakes. I'm wondering if you've ever made a mistake on social media, because you're kind of a public figure, and you ever think like, all right, I wouldn't do that again. That didn't work out too well.
Yeah, well, the two mistakes I've made, and I still make these mistakes, is one is sometimes I tend to assume what people believe as opposed to trying to find out what they believe.
Okay.
And another mistake that I make is sometimes not cutting off the interaction soon enough. There are some people, when you engage them as non-believers, they're simply not going to be moved towards your position. And by continuing to engage them, you're actually pouring gasoline on the fire. And it's better sometimes to cut things off, not only so that you don't really exacerbate the other person, but so that you kind of retain that capacity to be truly respectful and gentle when you are engaging a non-believer.
One thing I like to say is that my goal in any conversation is to win another conversation. Not necessarily to win the argument, but I at least want to keep the door open enough that maybe we can come back to this. Maybe we're not agreeing right now, but but I don't want to slam the door in their face so hard that it breaks everything down in the relationship. So
right, there's an art to knowing when to continue and when to stop.
Yeah, very good. Dr. Fuz Rana, everyone, and if you'd like to follow Fuz on social media, you can check him out on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Fazale Rana and get connected. Thanks, Fuz.
Thanks, Krista.
All right, and now let's go over to Monica and see what she's up to.
Hi, I'm Monica Jones, and with me today is Krista Bontrager. She is the Dean of Education here at Reasons to Believe, and I have to tell you, she's personally somebody that I've gone to a million times with all sorts of questions. She just has a wealth of information. So Krista has created a DVD called Ambassadors of the Gospel, this right here. Yeah. Krista, tell me, why is this an important tool for evangelism?
Well, really what this is, Monica, is it's kind of like missionary school, missionary training 101 for people that have thinkers in their group. Maybe you know a friend or a family member, and they're just like the analytical person. They love to ask the tougher, deeper questions. This is who that DVD will help equip you to be able to talk to them and engage with them in some very practical ways.
Okay. Now, in the DVD, I love that you bring up the point of how we can think like an ambassador, because as Christ followers, we are called to share about our faith with people, but sometimes I don't know where to start. I don't know, how do I prepare myself to do just that? So tell me, what is thinking like an ambassador?
Yeah, that idea comes from 2 Corinthians 5:20, where it says that we are Christ's ambassadors. And an ambassador is somebody who brings Christ with them wherever they go. And if we name the name of Christ, we tell people we go to church, they're going to have some thoughts about us. They're going to have some assumptions about us. But what we want to do is be good representatives of Jesus. We want to be thoughtful and intentional in how we're representing him. So, for example, a really practical way of doing that is asking questions. Right. You know, I think Christians so often we're into telling. We're big tellers. We want to just make a lot of declarations and proclamations about who we are and what we believe and everything. But we really want to be more relational in how we talk to people. And so asking questions, you know, what do you think about this? I like to ask is like what questions or how questions, you know, help me understand what your experience with Christians has been before. Has it been positive? Has it been negative? What have you heard about what Christians believe? What have you heard about who Jesus is? So to ask better questions.
Right. And you have some really good conversation starters in here. So give me a couple of those. Like I'm on a plane with someone next to me and I want to engage in conversation. Go.
Yeah. So you find yourself at a party or on an airplane or somewhere and all of a sudden you realize, wow, this person has a lot of education and they have a scientific background maybe. What do I do? Do I say nothing? That's a little intimidating for a lot of people if they're not educated. So one of the biggest things is first know who you are. You know, don't think you know more than you really do. You know, just because you've taken a couple of classes in apologetics doesn't make you an expert on a whole wide variety of topics. So one of my tips is know who you are and know who the other person is and let them be an expert. If they're a scientist, let them be an expert in their own science. And again, this is where questions is helpful. Ask questions. Tell me about this. Tell me about what you did your doctoral research on. Tell me about what you're interested in, what questions you're interested in. That's a great way to start a conversation with a scientist, even if you don't know anything about science.
Right, right. Those are good tips. I kind of harass some of these scholars around here pretending I know the science, but that's for another episode.
That's right.
Well, Krista, thank you so much for sharing information on this great resource. And you may have some divine appointments coming your way, people who need to know Jesus. And this resource will help you to confidently engage thinkers and be an ambassador for Christ. So you can get your copy of Ambassadors of the Gospel with a donation of any amount for the months of January and February. I hope you will get your copy, and let's see how God uses you.
Welcome to Culture Talk. I'm joined here today with Mark Perez. He is a retired Deputy Chief for the Los Angeles Police Department. And Mark, you are also a local visiting scholar.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about kind of a somber topic. We have a lot of tragedies happening across the nation and across the world. And a very common response is, "You're in my thoughts and prayers." And unfortunately, that's such a common response that it has kind of become a trope that non-believers especially take issue and offense with. So how would you respond to the issue or the question of, are thoughts and prayers really a trope?
Well, in some respects it is. It has become a trope. I remember standing on the dais with politicians and elected officials of other types too, and hearing them say that and cringing and thinking, I know these people aren't being genuine. I think there's something more to this than just they really believe what they're saying. I don't think any of them prayed. And so when you look at that, you have to ask yourself, as a Christian, how ought we to be behaving? So when we look at the politicians, it's pretty easy to see that there's some self-aggrandizement there. They're just reflecting on their own virtue and calling attention to themselves rather than really showing sympathy to the victims. But as Christians, we have a completely different viewpoint. But at the same time, we as Christians can accidentally be trivializing. And so how would this look? So for example, let's look at Facebook or Twitter or something like this, where these social media are immediately effective. They can be immediately effective in making something very deep and concerning, or they can trivialize the sacred. And that's the fear that I have with this, is that if we as Christians aren't careful in our use of the language and we trivialize the sacred, we're going to miss the point of the opportunity that God gives us even among tragedies. So let's say, for example, something happened far away, and we want to reach out to these people who are the victims. Sometimes we can do it with social media. Other times we have to ask ourselves, are we just joining in a party?
Right. And being that trending, like responding to something that's trending, so then you find yourself in the Twitter moment.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And is that the right way? Would Jesus do that?
Right.
Probably not. Jesus was very careful with his words. As a matter of fact, he was very efficient with his words.
Yes.
And so we ought to be the same way. Now, that isn't to say that we would never do that. But if we're going to put something out there where the public is going to see it, and we're going to call ourselves a Christian, then it ought to be deep enough so that it is not ever critiqued for being trivializing.
Right.
And if it's going to be somebody up close, somebody who we know has been struck by some kind of tragedy, or we're close proximity, and maybe it's in our own town or something like that, it could be much more personal.
Right.
And the language should be something much more farther away from a cliche, like this hurts me.
Right. Yeah.
Something that simple.
That's a good choice of words there. So in addition to offering those words, what are some tangible ways that Christians can help and to be a representative of Christ in situations like these?
Well, obviously in the places where things happen far away. I mean, if you're in California, something happens in Florida, the opportunities are limited.
Yeah.
Certainly we can do things like contact people down there and see if there's any opportunities for us. Giving money to charities or other things to charities that are well known, because there are a lot of phonies out there. I would be very careful about that. But that's very tangible. And money and gifts go a long way, as long as the people who are supposed to receive it actually receive it.
Right.
Closer in, if it's a family, for example, that's been struck, or a group of families, it would be just like Jesus to gather people together and to go to the families or the places where the help is needed and provide something tangible like meals, or can we take care of your children, or pick them up at school, or do things that are the hands and feet of Jesus.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Mark. To learn more from Mark or to hear more from him, visit reasons.org and search Mark Perez. And, one of the things that we want to just encourage is through your prayer, see how God can step into that and show you how to be the light in a dark place.
Thanks for joining us this week on 2819.
We know that sharing your faith can be intimidating, so we hope that you've picked up some nuggets of truth to share with someone that you love.
And we hope that this show will just inspire you to think more intentionally about the people that God has placed strategically and supernaturally in your life. they want to know Jesus is their creator and their savior.
Absolutely. And this show, again, was made possible through the faithful support of Reasons to Believe donors. So if you feel led to support resources like this show, then please visit give.reasons.org.
Until next time, check us out on the web at reasons.org. Lots of great blog posts, articles, podcasts. If you really are ready to take the next step to go deeper into these conversations, it's all waiting for you right there.
Yep, and you'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you want to get connected. We're at 2819 Show.
We'll see you next week.